My name is Anna. For 15 years, I worked 2 jobs, skipped vacations, and drove a car that was more rust than metal. I did it all for one thing: a small 2-bedroom house on a quiet street. It wasn't a mansion, but it was mine. Every nail, every floorboard, every blade of grass in the tiny front yard was paid for with my own sweat and sacrifice. This is the story of how my family tried to take it from me the moment it was truly mine. It happened the week I burned my final mortgage statement. I had waited for that piece of paper for half my adult life, and when it arrived, the words "paid in full" seemed to hum on the page. That Saturday, I held a small celebration. It wasn't a party, just a quiet moment of victory with the people I thought were my bedrock. My parents and my brother, Mark. I made a little fire in the backyard pit, and under a sky fading from blue to orange, I fed the statement to the flames. The paper curled, blackened, and turned to ash. A 15-year wait dissolved into the evening air. We moved inside for cake. The house was filled with the smell of sugar, coffee, and accomplishment. I felt light, free in a way I hadn't realized I was missing. My mother was telling a story about when I was a kid. My father was smiling, and Mark was leaning against the kitchen counter. For a moment, everything felt perfect. Then she spoke. My brother's wife, Caroline. She had been standing by the sliding glass door, looking out at my garden with a strange, appraising look on her face. She turned, a slow smile spreading across her lips. It wasn't a happy smile. It was a smile of acquisition. "We're going to live here." 4 words. That's all it took. They weren't a question or a suggestion. It was a declaration, dropped like 4 sharp knives in the middle of my living room. The air went still. The cheerful chatter died. My mother's story hung, unfinished, in the sudden, heavy silence. Behind her stood my brother, Mark. He didn't look at me. He didn't look at his wife. He just stared at the floor, his shoulders hunched, as if the weight of her words had physically bent him. He was a shadow, a silent partner in the theft of my joy. My parents shifted uncomfortably on the sofa. My dad cleared his throat and forced a laugh that sounded like cracking wood. "Oh, Caroline! What a thing to say!" My mother patted my arm, her touch weak and uncertain. "She's just joking, Anna. You know how she is." But no one else laughed. Caroline's smile didn't waver. She just looked at me, her eyes confident, expectant, as if waiting for me to hand over the keys. That silence, the way they all refused to meet my eyes, told me everything I needed to know. This wasn't a joke. This was a plan they had discussed. In their eyes, my victory, the thing I had just celebrated, the ashes of my sacrifice still warm in the backyard, was not my own. It was a shared asset. They thought my blood, my sleepless nights, and my years of saying no to myself were simply family property. And they were here to collect. I should have seen it coming. The signs were there all along, little red flags I had chosen to ignore. When I first met Caroline 5 years ago, she hugged me too tightly, called me big sister, and her voice was syrupy sweet. Her smile seemed permanently fixed in place, a tool designed to disarm. I wanted to believe it was genuine. Family had always been scarce currency in our house. Growing up, love and attention were things you had to earn. Mark was the golden child, the one who could do no wrong. I remember when he broke our father's antique watch. I took the blame because I knew I could handle the quiet disappointment, while he would have faced a fleeting anger. I was the responsible one, the quiet one, the family bedrock, stable and overlooked. So when Caroline came along, with her loud affection and her constant talk of family being everything, a part of me desperately wanted to let her in. But slowly, her questions began to feel less like conversation and more like probes. "How much do you have left on the mortgage, Anna?" She'd ask while we were washing dishes. "Your savings must be pretty healthy now, right?" Then came the comments about my home. The first time she visited, she walked through every room, running her hand along the walls. "This place is so big," she'd said. "Perfect for kids." A year later, it became more pointed. "Mark and I could totally see ourselves here one day," she said, standing in my kitchen like she was measuring it for her own furniture. She said it like a prophecy she was already arranging in her head. Mark would laugh it off nervously. "Honey, don't scare my sister." But he never told her to stop. He never said, "This is Anna's house." His silence was permission. A cold knot would tighten in my stomach every time, but I pushed it down, telling myself I was being paranoid. The final, undeniable proof of the betrayal came in whispers, late on a Sunday night when they thought I was asleep. Mark and Caroline had stayed late after dinner. Around 10, I said I was tired and went up to my bedroom. I didn't turn on the light, just sat on the edge of my bed, listening to the muffled sounds from downstairs. I felt exhausted, not from the day, but from the constant effort of pretending. After my parents left, I heard Caroline's voice, low and conspiratorial. She was on her phone, standing at the bottom of the stairs, believing I was out of earshot. I crept out of my room and stood silently at the top of the hallway, shrouded in darkness. Her words drifted up, clear and sharp as glass. "No, they just left," she was saying to someone, probably her mother. The whole thing went perfectly. "She has no idea." A pause. I held my breath. "I know, right? He just paid it off. It's perfect timing for us. That house will stay in the family. That's what his parents want too." My blood ran cold. His parents. My parents. When we move in, I'll redo the kitchen first. All this dark wood is so depressing. I want white cabinets and a big island. Anna never had any real style. When? Not if. My chest went cold. It was a physical sensation. A wave of ice washing through me, leaving me numb and trembling. It wasn't just a fantasy anymore. It was a concrete plan. They had talked about it. They had a timeline. And my own family had encouraged it. I backed away from the stairs, silent as a ghost, and shut my bedroom door without a sound. I slid down against it, my legs too weak to hold me. The whispers from downstairs continued, but all I could hear was the roaring in my ears. The sound of my own trust shattering. They weren't just going to ask for my house. They were planning a coup. That night, I didn't sleep. I lay in bed, staring at the ceiling, while a storm of emotions raged inside me. First came the white-hot fury. I imagined storming downstairs and screaming at them, throwing Caroline out of my house and asking my brother how he could stand there, silent and complicit. But as the hours passed, the fire of my anger began to cool, hardening into something colder and stronger. Resolve. A shouting match was a battle they were prepared for. They would twist it, paint me as selfish and hysterical, and play the victims. They had been playing a psychological game for years, chipping away at my boundaries. A loud fight was a game they would win. No, I wouldn't give them that satisfaction. Rage burns fast. Strategy lasts longer. As the first gray light of dawn filtered through my window, I made a decision. I would not let them see my anger or my pain. I would let them think they'd won the psychological war. I would let them continue with their whispers and their plans. I would let them walk right into the trap I was about to build. My whole life I had been the peacemaker, the one who bit her tongue to avoid an argument. That version of me died that night. They thought blood meant entitlement. They were about to learn that ownership means boundaries, and mine were about to become walls of steel. The next morning, my new life began. My first call was to a locksmith who quietly changed every lock on every door. The new keys felt heavy and real in my hand. My next visit was to my attorney, Mr. Harris, an older man with sharp eyes who believed in ironclad paperwork more than promises. I sat in his quiet, book-lined office and told him everything, my voice calm and steady. He listened without interruption. When I finished, he nodded slowly. "This is more common than you'd think, Anna," he said, his voice grim. "Entitlement is a powerful drug." He didn't waste any time. Within days, he filed an amendment to my property deed, adding a clause that explicitly confirmed I was the sole legal owner. He called it an extra layer of armor. Then we updated my will. This was the hardest part. My old one had left the house to Mark, a decision made in a past life where I still believed in family above all else. "You don't owe them anything," Mr. Harris said gently. I took a deep breath. "I want the house to be sold," I told him. "I want the entire proceeds to be donated to the local animal shelter." The thought of Caroline's face if she ever found that out brought a grim smile to my own. No one would profit from my hard work except those who deserved it. All the while, I kept up the facade. I went to Sunday dinners and smiled through every gathering. I listened to Caroline talk about how cramped their apartment was, how they needed a yard. I would watch her eyes drift around my living room, taking inventory. She was eyeing my home like prey, and I played the part of the oblivious victim, all while quietly fortifying my life against her. Every legal document signed, every new key turned, felt like another stone in the wall I was building. The confrontation came on a gray Saturday afternoon about a month later. My parents were over, the reconnaissance team. Then Mark and Caroline arrived without calling. We were in the neighborhood, Caroline chirped. We need to talk. We all sat in the living room, the air thick with unspoken expectations. Anna, my father began, looking at his hands, you know Mark and Caroline are thinking about the future, about starting a family. It's hard to do that in a 2-bedroom apartment with no yard, my mother added, her voice laced with a familiar, gentle guilt. Caroline saw her opening. She crossed her arms, her sweet facade dropping away to reveal the hard ambition underneath. This house is just too big for you, Anna. You don't even use the 2nd bedroom. We're family, and families share. It's the right thing to do. I looked at my brother. He stayed quiet, his gaze fixed on a loose thread on the arm of the sofa. His silence was his answer. It screamed his cowardice. Then my father delivered the line that finally broke me. He looked up at me, his face earnest. It wouldn't hurt to help your brother out, sweetie. He's always looked up to you, that was it. The moment my patience finally, irrevocably broke. I had spent my entire life keeping the peace for these people. People who only saw my success as their inheritance. I stood up slowly, every movement deliberate. The room went quiet as they watched me. I walked over to a bookshelf by the fireplace and picked up a thick manila folder I had placed there that morning. The weight of it felt good in my hands. It felt like justice. I turned to face them. I looked directly at Caroline. You think this house is yours? I asked, my voice low and even, cutting through the silence. She smirked, a look of pure, unadulterated triumph on her face. It's family property, Anna, she said, her voice dripping with condescension. We're family. I took a step closer, forcing her to look up at me. No, I said. It's mine. Paid for with my money, my time, and my silence while you two sat in your apartment and mocked my boring life. I opened the folder. This, I said, placing a copy of the newly fortified deed on the coffee table in front of her, says otherwise. I then pulled out a copy of my updated will, and this is my final testament. It states that upon my death, this house and all my assets will be donated to a charity. I paused, watching the color drain from her face. No one in this room will ever profit from this house. Caroline's smirk shattered. Mark's jaw dropped. But I wasn't finished. I laid out screenshots of text messages Mark had sent me over the years, asking for money, next to bank statements showing the transfers. I have been preparing for this conversation, I said, my voice still quiet, but now edged with steel. And if you ever try to step inside this house again without my explicit invitation, these documents, along with my testimony about your coordinated campaign of harassment, become evidence in a restraining order and a lawsuit for attempted fraud. I leaned in a little closer, making sure they heard my final words clearly. You seem to have a misunderstanding about how things work. Parasites don't inherit, they just die off when the host cuts them out. The silence that followed was absolute. It was a dense, suffocating silence, filled with shattered entitlement and raw shock. Caroline's pride had cracked right down the middle. For the first time since I'd met her, she had nothing to say. Mark was crushed by the weight of his own cowardice. My parents stared at the floor, ashamed of being caught, not of being wrong. They left that day without another word. Mark practically pulled Caroline out of the house. The front door clicked shut behind them, and the house was mine again. The quiet they left behind was the most peaceful sound I had ever heard. For weeks, the silence continued. I heard later through a cousin that Caroline was telling everyone a wild, twisted version of the story where I was a cold, selfish monster. Some relatives believed her, but the truth, as it often does, traveled faster. Most of the family knew how hard I had worked. They knew my brother. My victory wasn't loud, but it was total. No one dared mention family property to me ever again. In the months that followed, my house transformed. It had always been my sanctuary, but now it felt like my fortress. Some nights I walk through the quiet halls, running my fingers along the walls. They're not just wood and plaster. They're proof that I built something they couldn't steal. There is no guilt. There is no regret. Just a deep, quiet sadness for the family I wished I had, but no grief for the one I lost. Because I realize now they were never truly mine to begin with. It's been over a year now. Life is quieter, simpler. Mark calls sometimes, but not often, usually late at night when Caroline isn't in the room. His voice is always hesitant, filled with an unspoken apology he doesn't have the courage to say out loud. I answer when I feel like it. The choice is mine. Power isn't loud revenge. It's the quiet, unshakable peace that can't be touched by their drama or their demands. I own my space, my silence, my story. And in all of this, I've learned one final, crucial truth. You can forgive a thief for what they tried to steal, but you never, ever leave your door unlocked again. If you've ever had someone try to take what you worked for, let me know in the comments. Because sometimes boundaries are the loudest form of revenge. Don't forget to like, share, and subscribe.